Hello. Now we're going to talk about an electronic throttle body. This one in particular happens to be off of a Chevy Silverado. So what we're looking at here is a probably more modern device. We used to have accelerator pedal cables and things like that that would open this throttle blade via the cable and how far you were pushing on the gas pedal. Now the computer's going to take control of all of these operations and open and close this throttle plate based on accelerator pedal position sensors that are located on the gas pedal itself. So that pedal is no longer mechanically hooked to this device. It's simply sending signals to to the computer. The computer is then sending out an output command to the throttle body. What we do have on the end here, you can see 6 terminals. We have a power and a ground for the stepper motor that's going to actually run the throttle blade, and then we have a signal power and signal ground, and then we have 2 signal wires. So each one of these devices is going to hold 2 potentiometers, and those are going to send back position information about this valve to the ECM or PCM. And so a couple of things I want to point out to you is this movement right here. Now obviously this is unhooked and this is spring loaded. So when you key on a modern vehicle, you can hear some clicks under the hood. And what you're hearing is this throttle blade actually testing itself. So it's going to snap shut and then snap back open to its normal idle position. So in a past video, we talked about idle air control valves and how they allow air to bypass this blade to control the engine idle. If you look, you can see through this one just a little bit. So this blade is open to allow some air to enter the engine. And what's going to happen as you are idling at a stoplight, now that AC compressor kicks on, this is actually going to open the throttle just a little bit, and it's going to help control the idle for various different things. Maybe you're driving in a parking lot and the power steering is really demanding a lot of extra horsepower to turn a pump or an alternator or something like that. So this device is going to help control engine idle for different load operations. And also the beauty of a electronic throttle is we all know we've had very bad times with transmissions, automatic transmissions to be specific. So one of the big problems with automatic transmissions is when a vehicle is accelerated, the transmission goes to the next gear. The engine basically has to be depowered via a fuel and ignition cut. So it's going to retard the ignition timing and it's going to cut fuel on the fuel injection, depower the engine, and then shift the gear and then bring all of that back online. The ability to control engine power with this electronic throttle plate is really awesome, because now instead of depowering all of that stuff, cutting the fuel injection, cutting the ignition timing, all they're going to do is they're simply going to close this throttle blade down some. They're going to allow the transmission to shift, and then they're going to go ahead and open it back up. So those of you who have an electronic throttle body, you're going to notice when your car changes gears, the engine RPM drops. Now, there are some instances where it doesn't. If you go full throttle and you open this thing up all the way, it's going to keep on speeding up because your car thinks, you're getting out of the way of something. It doesn't want you to get in a wreck just due to depowering. So it doesn't always do that, but under normal driving, it is going to close this throttle blade back, shift the transmission, and then go ahead and open it back up. Now, a couple of things I want to point out. When you're testing these, you can test them on the car. Take the air cleaner, basically tube off, the induction tube. Turn the key on. You should be able to see this move when you push the accelerator pedal. Now you see I'm moving it with my finger. This thing is unplugged. Do note that in the service manuals it will tell you don't use your finger if this is hooked up to the engine wiring harness, because it can actually cut your finger off. This motor has a lot of power and you could have damaged digits there. So make sure you keep your fingers clear, use a screwdriver or something like that. One other thing I wanted to talk about inside this throttle body, you can see this black carbon coating. We're going to call that coking. That's kind of an old term, but it's still an accurate one today. And what that is anytime you have hot air coming in, and keep in mind we're going to have crankcase ventilation fumes and things like that coming in this throttle body through the PCV valve. This is where the air will cool off a little bit. So we call that a quench zone, and that's going to allow this carbon to build up. The reason you need to be aware of that is that can actually stick this blade shut or stick it kind of half open. So we sell what's called a fuel induction service, and most dealerships do as well. And that's going to help remove this coking from the throttle body and make sure that this device goes ahead and continues to operate normally. So a few other things you can test here. You can test the two potentiometers with your DVOM. But obviously, we're going to check it with a scan tool and check our signals on our TPS1, TPS2, and our APP1 and APP2. Make sure that all of those are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then we can also get open and closed circuit or short circuit codes for the motor on the inside. So these are going to set codes fairly often. This truck was fairly new and fairly low miles. You see I'm holding it in my hands because it already had a problem. Next random thing I do want to point out here, these bolts are captured. They don't come out of this throttle body. And so these are torque to yield bolts. When you buy a new throttle body, you're supposed to put new bolts in it. So if you take a throttle body off of a vehicle to do some other service, let's say take the intake manifold off, make sure you're following the procedure, because a lot of times these bolts are one-time use. If you take this off and try and put it back on, there's the odds when you go to torque these bolts, you're actually going to break them. So be very careful, make sure you're following your procedure. Do you have to take the throttle body off to change the intake manifold? In most cases you don't, but students and technicians alike sometimes like to just get it out of the way. So if you don't have to remove this from that component, please don't, because that's just more money our customers are going to have to spend and more risk of breaking something unnecessarily.